books over here. Hi guys, it's Angie. I have the reboot of motivational. It's Mojito this time. Sometimes I switch it up and it's motivational mocha. This time I have a legit mojito over here. But yeah, this one's gonna be a motivational mojito. I don't have a lot of table space in this particular space right now, turned this way anyway. So I'll probably have to be doing a lot of twisting in this video because I do need hydration, but also need to work with the books we're talking about here. So this one, what was I calling this one? Professional pursuits. I have a couple books that talk about getting your life rolling again to where you can have a more fulfilling life in general, and then hopefully work that into strengthening your business goals and pursuits and things like that. The first one I'm going to start with is one that I'm not going to talk about too long because it had some alright stuff in it, but I wasn't overly impressed with it. But there were a few things I thought I would mention from it, and it's the 5 essentials using your inborn resources to create a fulfilling life. Thought there was another word in there, but no, it's just to create a fulfilling life by Bob Deutsch. And Bob Deutsch, as you see on there, has a PhD, and he has a background in, what was it? Neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience and anthropology. And in this book, he poses his theory, or at least, is it theory? Is that the right word? His method. I don't know, I'm struggling for the right word here. But his belief, I guess, would be the safe word to use. His belief that there are 5 basic innate traits that everybody has inside of them that they can tap into and develop to end up with a more fulfilling life as a whole. So the 5 areas he looks at are curiosity, which is basically just your ability to look around and say, oh, what is that? Oh, what does this mean? You know, just your overall desire or quest for knowledge. How high is that? Is it an area you need to develop? Do you need to read more? Do you need to research more? Or is it something you're always drawn to? Do you always need to know the answers for things? That plays into it, the overall 5 traits. The next one is openness. Here he talks about how open you are to things. Are you okay with surprises? Do you need to have everything plotted out in your life? Do you need to know the exact details of everything? Or are you okay to have life throw you a curveball once in a while? That's the idea of that one, is are you okay with surprises? You know, are you the type that can go with the flow and enjoy that sort of thing? Because he says that the more open you are to just life running its course and not necessarily like sitting back and being a lazy spectator in your own life, but just that sense of, you know, whatever life's going to bring with me, I'm going to roll with it kind of attitude. Developing that attitude about your situation can benefit you towards moving towards your goals in a more calm, fulfilling way. And then he talks about sensuality, which normally when people hear that word, they almost immediately associate it with sex, but which is part of it. But in this case, he's just talking about the senses in general. How in tune are you with your general senses? Do you take the time to notice the separate flavors in the dishes you're eating? Do you notice scents in nature? Or are you the type of person that like goes in the store and like feels all the fabrics? How in tune are you with textures and scents and how those make you feel, or the responses you get from those? That type of sensuality. And then paradox kind of plays into the idea of openness in a way. It also talks about how open you are to things, but with paradox it's more about looking at if you're the type of person who has to have black and white answers for everything. Are you very, like, I almost liken it to, are you very linear and scientific and the type of person that says, you know, I have to have some sort of proof to believe this exists? Or are you okay with things being sort of a gray mystery in life? Are you okay with not always having the answers to things and just seeing what comes of that sort of thing? So that's the idea of paradox, and they sort of play, that and openness sort of play with each other. And then the last one he talks about is self-story. That's his term for it, where it's basically just getting in tune with who you are at your core. He says that in this area, it's discovering the balance inside yourself, your good and your bad, your beautiful points, your warts, the things that trigger you, the things that calm you, all those sorts of things that eventually bring you to a place of being centered, or at least getting you to that point. One of the phrases he uses in here to describe this part of the process is always be on your way home. Which, I don't know, I kind of liked the idea of that, always be on your way home, which is just his sort of new agey way of saying, you know, always be striving to find who you are at your core. So along with those ideas, he also gets into a few other more specific concepts. Like he talks about decentration as opposed to concentration, where it's essentially just the idea of shutting out the noise of the world sometimes, and especially if you're having a moment where you're really stressed out and everything seems really loud and busy. If you can get to a place where you can just sort of pause and take a deep breath. And also what plays into this is he mentions sometimes we can get really caught up in our personal role in something to the point where we're just distracted by everything else and we get overwhelmed. So he said part of decentration is realizing that's happening and then taking that moment and at least somehow momentarily taking yourself, hypothetically, not literally, hypothetically taking yourself out of the situation that's stressing you out and shutting out the outside noise, the people chattering in your ear, telling you what you should do, what you should be, the pressure of society, all of those concepts, just silencing them somehow and just looking at a situation or a problem directly as it is, just the facts of it, not everything else going on, not all the influences, nothing, just what you know for a fact to be true about that unique situation, and focusing on that until you can get back to a calm, healthy place where you can get back on track to where you want to go. It's this idea of decentration is not unique to him, to Deutsch. It actually dates back to like the early 20th century, I think, but he works it into his theory of this 5 unique traits. He also talks about something that he didn't mean it in a funny way, but it was one of those things where like when he talks, because with like self-help books, they like to use acronyms a lot so you can remember these things when you need a little motivation. Sometimes those acronyms just come out kind of funny, or at least in my head, because like a lot of people, you have that center of your brain, not center of your brain, but like that corner of your brain that's basically forever 10 or 12. But he talks about the idea of popularity and how a lot of people are susceptible to driving their life towards levels of popularity and how important that is to them. And he talks about like with his studies with anthropology and just observing people in general. He ran scientific panels where he did questionnaires and studied people and stuff. And he came back with this idea that popularity basically comes down to 3 core concepts that he can narrow it down to, which is familiarity, appeasement, and power. But when he did the acronym, it came out FAP, which my brain read as FAP. So I had a little giggle thinking that he's saying that the core of popularity is fapping. So that was a little weird. But yeah, when you're not so impressed with books one way, you kind of get your giggles another way. A lot of this is very it's your basic self-help, you know, someone introducing their concept of the type of things that have been repeated a million times over to, you know, find your self-confidence and all that. Every once in a while you hit a gem where somebody comes out with really new material. This was not one of them. He covers a lot of the same material that everyone else does. He just puts different buzzwords on them. So there wasn't a lot to that one, but you know, there are like little nuggets here and there that at least, you know, give you food for thought. But I don't know. I thought I would ask you guys if you want to share in the comments below techniques you use to center yourself when you feel stressed out like that, or what do you do to quiet yourself? Like with me, I know like on this channel, if you go into my playlists, you can see I have one playlist that has nothing to do with me other than it's a playlist I created from other YouTube videos I find that are like atmospheric. I know a lot of people use ASMR. The only problem is like a lot of the ASMR community is the whispering stuff, which for me, that doesn't work for me. It bugs the shit out of me to hear people low whispering. it nags in my ear, and I don't find it relaxing. For me, nature sounds work, except I don't do well with bird noises. So that's why I'm on the playlist I put together where I put like my favorite meditation or soundscapes and stuff. The majority of them you find on there are like wind and rain and stuff, because that's what works for me. I mean, you have to find what works for you, but I'm just using that as an example. That's one thing I use to quiet my mind. The other thing is I use a lot of lo-fi music that doesn't have a lot of words in it, or if it does, it's like very calming spoken word with quiet affirmations or bits of speeches or something that are put to soothing sounds, that kind of thing. I use that a lot when I'm doing book reviews or trying to write out notes for doing videos later. That's one thing I have that kind of helps me center. When I was in high school, I used classical music a lot. It was the same type of thing, because you know, when I was in high school I wasn't aware of lo-fi and soundscapes and all that. Except I do remember I had one CD that I played all the time. That was like Canon D, what was that one? That's like used at weddings a lot, but it was set to like ocean waves. Played that all the time. And I graduated with honors, so you know, maybe it helped. But yeah, I do that. I use that kind of sound or music soundscapes a lot. Use a lot of like essential oils, burning essential oils, that helps. I use a lot of, one thing I use is brown rice tea. The smell of brown rice tea tends to calm me and center me when I'm freaking out about something. Just a few ideas I can think of off the top of my head that I go to a lot. So what are some of yours that you can maybe suggest to other viewers that are, you know, going through anxiety, or maybe in school or a work project that's overwhelming them or something? If you want to contribute something down in the comments as far as an idea you have to calm them down, feel free to share that down below. That's kind of all I had with this one. It's basically comes down to just figuring out your core. Once you figure out your core and who you are and what you want and all that, then you can put that into this book, Zoom, Surprising Ways to Supercharge Your Career. This one, it's not a direct self-help, I guess. It's more stories that maybe you can take something from. The guy, Daniel Roberts, that put this together, he gives you little tips here and there based off of the stories he offers you, but he doesn't, if I remember right, I don't think he like necessarily gives you like a guideline or a plan or something, said, oh, this is what you should do. This one, this is more of a compilation of a look at different celebrities, actors, actresses, sports figures. There's business people in here, scientists, just all these like big name people, you know, where you're like, wow, they've had some success. People that have ended up on Fortune, is it Fortune or Forbes? Fortunes. I get those two mixed up. Fortune magazine's 40 Under 40 series, where they talk about 40 people who have made their millions or whatever under the age of 40. Daniel Roberts, this one was published back in 2013, I think. And Daniel Roberts, I don't know if he is now, but at the time this was published, he was a staff writer at Fortune magazine and headed up that feature of theirs. And so here he compiled all kinds of different stories from some of the people that have been featured on that list over the years, and asked them to share more details about their personal roads to success and little tips and tricks they used, who their mentors were, time management skills, how they motivate themselves, all that kind of stuff in here. I thought it was cute that a lot of people in this book mentioned their mom as a mentor. And there are people in here from like just some of the contributors. They talk about Mark Zuckerberg and LeBron James and Elon Musk, I know is mentioned in here. I guess I can look at my notes. Some of the other ones. Mark Andreessen. I don't know if I'm saying his name right. But he does the foreword on this book, and he was one of the co-founders of Netscape. Yeah, remember Netscape? But now he sits on the board for companies like Facebook and eBay, and he's also one of the investors behind companies like Twitter and Airbnb, I think they said he invests in. So I guess he has some reliable knowledge about how to make things work. So they talked to him, Under Armour founder Kevin Plank, Interscope Records president John Janik. There's a story about both of them in here, and because both of them are friends of Pete Wentz, who heads up the band Fall Out Boy, and there's a couple different stories in here that involve him and the two of them. One is about the Under Armour president or founder, and then the other one is about Janik, the president of Interscope. And both stories talk about how it works off the concept of networking, and how sometimes the people you're friends with can help you get to where you want to go. Not in a selfish way, but just, you know, right place at the right time kind of thing. Like in the case with Kevin Plank, there's a story in here about how because he was friends with Pete Wentz, Pete Wentz would use a lot of Under Armour products before the company really took off. It was sort of still kind of a quiet company, but Pete Wentz liked the stuff so much that he would write blogs about it on his blog and talk about like, oh man, this stuff is great. And people started looking into it because they were fans of Pete Wentz, and popularity picked up, and then all of a sudden Jamie Foxx was wearing Under Armour gear for his role in the football movie Any Given Sunday, and then Under Armour blew up just from basically a friend blogging about another friend's company. And then there's the other story about blanked on his name, Janik. Sorry. John Janik being friends with Pete Wentz, and then later becoming president of Interscope Records, and then signing Fall Out Boy. Well, again, Pete Wentz goes to his blog and starts writing blog posts about things that are going on and his friendship with Janik, and again, through those blog posts, he ends up driving popularity up, not only for the band, but also for the record label. And so, you know, it looks at that whole idea of networking, and Robert suggests not only networking, but looking at building street teams and looking at, you know, do you have friends and family that can offer you free advertising in some way, or can you find free advertising somewhere else when you're first starting up? You know, like a lot of people, I don't know if people do it so much now. I mean, I think they do a little bit, but back in the day they used to put flyers everywhere, which not technically free advertising, but it was like the cheap way to do stuff. I guess street teams are kind of fall under free advertising. You just get a bunch of your friends together and go shout to the rooftops how great you and your stuff are. What was the other thing he mentioned? Oh, word of mouth. I guess that kind of falls under street team too. But, you know, just also making sure you have a great product to begin with, and not necessarily sitting on your laurels and being like, well, I'm just going to have a great name and have a mystery product. Like, no, actually putting the time into making sure you have something worthwhile for your customers down the road, and building it that way. The thing I found funny though is Roberts talks a lot about networking in here, but a lot of the people he talked to, as far as the successful people, a lot of them actually, they didn't necessarily say to not do networking at all, but a lot of them were coming back saying don't focus on it so much. A lot of them were instead saying the thing they relied on was just being educated about their product, about the industry they were going into, just bracing themselves and boosting themselves up with knowledge in general, and figuring out the networking down the road, but not relying solely on the networking. But that's another thing Roberts kind of comes back around to, is the idea of research, and stressing the importance of knowing the business you're going into, the industry you're going into, and not assuming that everything's already been done. Some people make that mistake when they have a good idea and then they get discouraged because they convince themselves, oh, well, everything's already been done, everything's already been invented, there are no new ideas, so I shouldn't even try. And Roberts urges you not to fall into that trap. You don't know. Research. Maybe there is a similar product out there, but maybe you can bring a twist to it. Maybe it's a little bit ineffective the way it is out there now, and you can fix that. You just have to look into it and be passionate about what you're doing, and a path will present itself. One of the other ideas he brings up is one thing I honestly believe in is keeping your sense of humor about you. Not to the point where everything is a joke and you're just la-di-da about stuff. I mean, you're in it to make money if it's a business, so you do want to have a certain level of seriousness and dedication and everything, but you also don't want to be the person where everyone else in the room is like, oh God, here we go with the stick up their ass. It's like, you want to just be confident, but also easygoing, and still somebody that, you know, people want to spend time around. People want to invest their time and money into. So one of the things he talks about is keeping your sense of humor, not only for that, but also because you're gonna run into failures. You're gonna fall on your face. It's not gonna work out every time. A lot of times you're gonna fall on your face a lot for a long time before the answer comes. I can testify to that. I've been already spent a lifetime of falling on my face, but then being like, maybe tomorrow will be better. Not feeling like it right now, but it might. But that's where having a sense of humor comes in, and being like, it's just my luck. It's just my luck. But also always keeping in mind that luck can change. You're in a growing process. You're adapting, you know, the whole thing about, like, you know, it's the journey, not the destination, that idea. But if you have a sense of humor the whole time, you're going to get to a point down the road and you're going to be able to laugh about these stories and share it with others, and you're not going to be the bitter old sourpuss that nobody takes seriously because they're going to be like, you bitch about everything. People are going to like to hear the stories from people that still have a smile on their face and be like, yeah, I tripped up a lot. One of the examples he uses as far as like keeping it lighthearted is he talks about the development of Target and their in-store method line, the cleaning products method. And he says in the method headquarters, the admin has set it up to where there's beanbag toss tournaments and ping pong ball tournaments, and they encourage employees there in the method headquarters to create their own sort of snarky, tongue-in-cheek titles for their jobs. Just, again, to have a sense of humor about what they do. Because it might come in handy on those days when you really don't want to come into work. But if you have a funny title, like, what did they mention? Like, administrative assistants, their names were changed to zookeepers. And then the person that was the customer response manager, the title was changed to Chatty Cathy. Just little things like that. They would offer spin the wheel prize, like door prize contests, things like that, for like worker incentives. Just whatever they could think of to keep it lighthearted, so that people actually wanted to come to work and hang out with people and brainstorm and come up with good product ideas. And Method went on to create eco-friendly products and cute packaging, and by 2012 they had already broken $100 million in sales. So it's something to think about, you know, keeping it lighthearted and fun. Also remembering to keep it humble always. That's another thing I always stress too. Wherever you go, always keep it humble, which is didn't really catch on with a lot of people around me. But it's something I always strive for, is whatever happens, always keep it humble. He also says to be patient, be perseverant, and, you know, like I said, since you're going to fall on your face a lot probably, learn to be resilient, get back up, do it again. Don't give up after the first failure. All of those things they tell you when you're pursuing something. But one of the other things he says is you have to be confident almost to the level of cockiness. Almost. Like, you don't want to be a jerk about things, naturally, because again, people are going to tune you out or throw you out the door, or just in general not really respect you if you're overly cocky about it. Especially if you didn't take the time to back up your product and you're just, you know, talking out your ass. But being confident almost to the point of cockiness about your product or your skills that you're bringing to the table. But again, mixing that with this persona of being somebody that some others honestly want to be around. Just mashing all of those things together, being humble, being funny, but also knowing your worth and knowing your skill set. One of the things I thought about was when I was working various jobs over the years, I would have bosses every so often that would try to demean me and stomp down on my efforts. I had bosses over the years that took a lot of pleasure in being the boss and you being the peon and stuff. But I never let that get away from me too much. Like the last job I was able to do before my body tapped out, where I can't do long office hours anymore the way I used to. But the last job I had when I did graphic design work, my boss at that job was a strongly sexist asshole a lot of the times. Little man, but he would always say things differently to me than the guys that I worked with in my office. It was always things like, you know, and it was weird because it was like the way he talked to me, it felt like I was on the Mad Men set, because I would be busting my ass on design projects and he would immediately like try to move hours of work that I'd done to one of the guys on my team and then tell me I needed to start cleaning, or, you know, if he wanted to talk to the guys, he would honestly sometimes tell me, you know, why don't you go get me a cup of coffee, or, you know, honestly, I'd just be like, what? I'm sorry, I don't remember taking a 1940s receptionist job. It was aggravating, but I still just went about my job, and every so often he would try to challenge me, and not just him, but like bosses I had before him. And the thing I always stuck to is I used to say, I'm not really worried about it, because honestly, I can find a boss any day of the week. Any day. There is going to be somebody who will take me on and sign my check. Finding a boss is not that hard. for a boss to find a worker that has a strong work ethic, that believes in the company and does the long hours and is dedicated to their job, yeah, good luck finding that. That's that's knocking on the door all the time for bosses. So I always went into my jobs feeling like even if they were the boss, I still had the upper hand because I was harder to replace. And sure enough, when I would leave jobs, I would get that call a lot of times, not always, but a lot of times I would get that call a couple weeks later being like, could you come back just for a little bit? Like just even part-time or like for a few weeks or something. Like, I'm like, oh, are you struggling? Oh, do you remember that conversation? So yeah, that kind of plays into the idea of like knowing your worth, knowing the skills you bring to the table, knowing the crunch it's going to put them in when you leave. Because even when I didn't leave the job forever, even if it was like I just left for a shift, I could come back in my job and I would have these horror stories if I just left for a shift or if I was gone a few days, like vacation time or sick time or something. I would always get a boss or a assistant manager or somebody who would come in and be like, oh, thank God. This is a clusterfuck over there. I would have to be like, all right, because I naturally have always had that, you know, it's a mess, but we'll figure it out. And when I get stressed with myself, I always remember that was one of the best compliments my grandpa ever gave me. Is my grandpa was a decorated captain in the Navy. He went through like 3-4 wars or something and managed, you know, fleets of ships and everything. And one of the best compliments my grandpa ever gave me is he said he loved how I was never flustered and I just rolled with the punches. And he said, you know, I would be proud to have you on any of my crews. And I was just like, damn, it's like a lot coming from a military guy like that, because he didn't hand compliment. He was one of those guys didn't hand out compliments very often. So whenever I get a little bit flustered with myself or stressed or start losing belief in myself, I always remember that kind of thing. So you have to find whatever it is in you that you know without a doubt you can rely on about yourself. You know, whether it's being dedicated to your job, having a strong work ethic, or, you know, are you deeply empathetic? You know, are you very kind-hearted? Do you teach things very well? Any of those things that employers or even employees coming to you if you're starting a business, anything that people are going to gravitate towards like that. Always remind yourself of that's what you're bringing to the table, and that gives you the power in the situation. Like there's one story in here that talks about this guy, Dolph Vandenbrink. His whole story about how in just 11 years from sheer dedication to his job, he went from a management trainee at Heineken Brewery to their US CEO. In 11 years. He went from bottom of management to CEO, just from being driven and dedicated and knowing where he wanted to be. I've known people that have worked jobs 25, 30 years and they leave the job in the same position they came in 25 years ago. So yeah, it's just, I think this book does give you a lot of food for thought, a lot more than the other one. Although the other one is kind of useful in bits, but this one I felt like I was taking a lot more from, even though it's basically just stories. As far as like the celebrity thing, there's also a section in here that looks at, you know, is there such a thing when they say there's no such thing as bad publicity? Is that really a thing? One of the examples they use is the story behind LeBron James. When he was offered the chance to move from Cleveland Cavaliers to Miami Heat basketball teams. And in the summer of 2010, I think it was, ESPN made this special about the whole thing, and they just called it The Decision, where it was supposed to just follow him around and capture his thought process and stuff as he decided which move he was going to make. Was he going to stay with his team or make this big move? And after it aired, Esquire magazine, I think it was Esquire or GQ, now that I'm thinking about it, I think it might have been GQ. One of those men's magazines came out and said in their review that it was an accidental mockumentary. And it didn't end there. Fans, Cleveland Cavalier fans, took to the streets, burned their jerseys in the streets, made hate videos on YouTube. It just blew up insane. All this rage over what LeBron James finally decided. But by that fall, LeBron James had still made the 40 under 40 list. So that's what Roberts uses as, is there such a thing as bad publicity? But when I was thinking about this, when I was reading it, I don't know if that's like really a fair, because I was thinking about like LeBron James's wealth overall. Since the documentary aired in the summer of 2010, and by that fall he had still made the 40 under 40 list. That, as far as I know, I think that list goes by overall wealth. So unless they're just really bad with money somehow, I don't know that popularity is going to affect their overall wealth in that short a time enough to knock them off of that list, unless they were so close to the bottom. But I don't know, my thinking is maybe he still made that list because he just already had so much money in the bank that the whole mountain of hate that came out of him really didn't make a difference to his bank account. I don't know. But that is one idea they bring up in here. There's also a questionnaire thing in here where you can actually look at the questionnaire that Roberts sent all the contributors, and you can read their, like the rest of the book, he compiles it into actual stories, but in the very back it's like a supplemental section. You can read the actual questionnaires each person was sent and how they answered it. And I put a tag on this one because Brian Dees actually gave some of my favorite answers. He was also one of the ones that said his mom was his mentor. But he said, what's your best time management tactic? And he said, master the art of walking and reading at the same time. I used to be a pedestrian commuter a lot back in the day, and I actually did this a lot. I did a lot of reading because I used to walk miles to work back and forth because I didn't have a car. And I got a lot of reading done that way. He said, what's your best networking tip? Ask real difficult questions. People appreciate that more than small talk. And then he said, what advice would you give someone rising through the ranks, or what do you wish someone had told you? And this one I loved because I wholeheartedly back this up. He said, staple with zeal. No task is too small, and your attitude about the little things matter a lot. And this struck me because that was something I was always raised with. Growing up in a military family, that's something I heard out of both my dad and my granddad, who were in the military, who both said, never ask something of anyone that you're not ready to do yourself. And everyone I knew in the military circles, as far as like, you know, people both my dad and my grandpa worked with and hung out with, they were all like that. They were all ready to go. If they gave you a command and they had someone on their crew that was like, oh, but you can't do it, they were all ready to go. And it's something I see repeated now with Barry with the fire department. He does the same thing. You know, he's been in the department a long time now, where he trains people coming up, and he gets that every once in a while where people say, oh, it's easy for you to say, and then he'll go out there and kick your ass, ready to go. I've seen him do it every year. He smokes people on agility training, and he's been doing this close to 20 years now. So that is one thing I always back up and even with jobs I've had, I've always done it too, where, you know, however far up you get in the crew, always be ready to mop the floors, clean the bathrooms, staple, whatever, go on food runs, whatever you need to do. Just the main thing is making sure the job gets done, not arguing about who needs to do it, just get it done. And that was always the mentality I was raised with. So yes, wholeheartedly back up staple with zeal. So yeah, really loved his. And my favorite part in the book, which I figured I would end this video on, and maybe do the other video later after I charge my battery a little bit, is the section in here on Elon Musk, who he seems to be one of those divisive people, as far as like how people look at him. Some people are really impressed with him, other people think he's kind of a kook. I'm sort of in the middle about it. I think some of the stuff he comes out with, I think it sounds a little crazy. Sometimes I think he just says stuff because he knows it sounds crazy and he gets him in the news. But I think there is a brain behind all of it. I think he knows what he's doing. Yeah, maybe some of his ideas are a little bit out there, but yeah, like Roberts points out in this book, isn't that how all invention stories, or at least most of them, don't they all have that element in them of somebody saying, you're insane, that's never gonna work, and then, no, look, now we have light bulbs and computers and all kinds of technology because somebody was there saying that's never gonna work, and other people were like, challenge accepted. So that's kind of how I look at it. Some of it I was like, I don't know. But on the other hand, I'm like, I'll hear the guy out. But just that section on him in general, whatever you think about him as a person, just the story behind him, I thought was pretty inspiring. But before it gets into his story, there's a section in here at the start where I thought I would share. It says, almost everyone in business has had to make an uncertain move at some point, a step that seems high risk but potentially high reward. Then there are those who make a career out of such leaps of faith. I'll get there. Risk is scary and uncertain, but it's also where inspiration can come to you, and it's where, if your skill matches your ambition, you can succeed. Outside your comfort zone, you'll question what you find and think of fresh ways to approach the status quo. In this chapter, you'll see how 3 daring business leaders, Yahoo chief Marissa Mayer, financial iconoclast Meredith Whitney, and serial entrepreneur Elon Musk make it a habit to get into ventures that seem overwhelmingly challenging. Their example is emboldening. Pursue your wildest dreams, ideas, and you might find that it pays off a lot more than playing it safe does. Alright, so starting the Elon Musk section over here. It just goes into sort of his backstory, and some of the stuff he went through to give him the mindset of trying to accomplish these things. That I thought in the end was pretty inspiring. To say that Elon Musk dreams big smacks of understatement. For most people, a big dream might be a feat like co-founding the internet company PayPal and then selling it to eBay for more than $1 billion. Or creating SpaceX, a rocket company that successfully docked a capsule on the International Space Station. Or heading up the groundbreaking electric car maker Tesla Motors. Musk has done all 3, but his sights are set even higher, almost absurdly high. Musk's stated goal is to extend the survival of the human race itself. Go big or go home. Somebody's got to figure it out. He plans to do so by making man an interplanetary species in case Earth becomes uninhabitable. Specifically, he wants to try to colonize Mars. He has said that SpaceX will have the technology to get to the Red Planet within the next 20 years. With promises like that, it would be hard to argue that Musk isn't in over his head. The 42-year-old multi-billionaire, remember this was published in 2013, said to be the model for Tony Stark in the Iron Man movies, has attracted devoted followers as well as a swath of critics who said he's wasting billions, some of it taxpayer money, chasing down dreams that are too grandiose to ever be realized. Then again, so far, dreaming big has paid off pretty big for him. Born in South Africa in 1971, the first of 3 children, Musk did not have an easy childhood. As a boy, he was young for his grade. The combination of his small stature and his bookishness was a recipe for disaster in grade school. He said in a 2011 interview, making him an easy target for bullies. The name Musk didn't help either. So Musk retreated into the world of books. It was a habit that would serve him well later in life when he would essentially teach himself rocket science from textbooks. As a boy, he devoured all the comic books he could buy, and more that he didn't pay for until he got kicked out of the store. When he ran out of material one day, he literally began reading the encyclopedia. actually did that myself when I was a kid once because I got bored one day. Didn't read the entire set in one day. I just started reading it. I'd read through everything else. Musk sold his first company at age 12 for $500. It was a video game called Blastar. Later, he nearly created a second company, an arcade, but was thwarted when it turned out he needed an adult to sign the documents for the city permit. His parents, unaware of his plans until he presented them with the paperwork, declined to get into the arcade business. Then he got in trouble instead. Didn't take long for Musk to decide that America was where his talents would be truly appreciated. It's a cliche, but it's true. America is the land of opportunity, he said in a 2011 documentary. At 17, he went to Canada, which was as close as he could get to the States. His mother was born a Canadian citizen. Using that as a connection, Musk and his brother applied for their own citizenship, ignoring their parents' strong reservations. Once he got to Canada, Musk enrolled in Queen's University in Ontario, but wasn't enthralled by his courses. He later transferred to the University of Pennsylvania, where he earned degrees in engineering and business. Throughout his schooling, he didn't go to class much, just read the textbooks and then showed up for exams. Afterward, he went to Stanford University for a doctorate in applied physics and material science. Yet before he actually got to class, he took a considerable risk. He said goodbye to the useful security that a Stanford degree can provide, and instead dropped out to start another business. It was called Zip2 and made online publishing software. He sold it to Compaq for $300 million. For some, a payday like that would have meant early retirement. For Musk, it was just the beginning, already a lifetime ago in his timeline of corporate creation. Despite his poor attendance record, those years turned out to be a formative experience. It was around that time that Musk developed what would become his core philosophy. He came to the conclusion that three things would have the greatest impact on the future of humanity: the internet, sustainable energy, and space exploration. Talk about follow-through. He would go to create companies that tackled each of those areas. First, the internet. With Zip2, Musk had essentially created a web-based version of the Yellow Pages, cataloging the contact information and location of businesses. In 1996, replacing the phone book was still a revolutionary idea. In a recent documentary, his brother recalled that a skeptical client actually threw a phone book at the co-founders for having the audacity to think they could supplant it. Immediately after Compaq bought Zip2 in 1999, Musk went on to work creating an online financial company called X.com, focused on enabling payments via email. It combined with competitor Confinity in 2000 and became PayPal. In 2002, eBay bought PayPal for $1.5 billion, leaving Musk a huge pot of cash. Today, the payment business is instrumental in eBay's success. In 2012, it saw a 250% surge in mobile payment volume, landing a whopping $14 billion for the year. Next came space exploration. In 2002, Musk founded SpaceX, with the goal of someday reaching Mars. Originally, he planned to buy refurbished intercontinental ballistic missiles from Russia, but after his 3 fruitless trips to the country, the Russian rocket owners were generous with vodka, but not much else. The business relationship went south. Seeking the antiquated technology there, Musk came to the conclusion that he would need to make the spacecraft himself. It was a high-risk move that took incredible audacity and a substantial chunk of his personal fortune, but so far the returns had been big. In 2010, SpaceX launched a spacecraft into low Earth orbit and returned it safely. It was a feat that, as comedian Jon Stewart pointed out, had been accomplished by only 7 parties: the US, China, Russia, Japan, India, the European Space Agency, and Elon Musk. SpaceX went a step further in 2012 and successfully docked its Dragon capsule at the International Space Station. It has since carried cargo to and from the station 3 times. Finally, there's sustainable energy. In 2003, Musk co-founded the electric car company Tesla. The startup set out to make battery-powered cars that didn't compromise on speed or style. By creating an all-electric vehicle that was actually cool, Musk took aim at an entire auto industry. The Model S sedan, released in 2012, looks as sexy as any gas-powered sports car and can go from 0 to 60 in a blistering 4.2 seconds. The cars earned rave reviews for performance. Skeptics still fret over range anxiety, fear that the battery will die mid-drive. But that didn't stop Consumer Reports from giving it the highest rating in the magazine's history, a nearly perfect 99 out of 100. Musk got into his next renewable energy project in 2006. While he and his family were at the Burning Man festival, he gave his cousins Lyndon and Peter Rive the idea to create a solar company. If they did it, Musk told them, he would fund it and serve as chairman on the board. Thanks to the encouragement of cousin Musk, Lyndon Rive had become a guru on energy issues in his own right. Musk has had his brushes with doom, though. In 2007, it seemed like all was going well. Inc. magazine had named Musk its Entrepreneur of the Year, gushing, finally, an entrepreneur who's not afraid to think really, really big. Then the 2008 financial crisis rocked the world financial system, and with it, all of Musk's businesses. Suddenly, he was facing the very real possibility of financial ruin. Tesla encountered big delays in mounting expenses, Solar City was failing, and SpaceX had 3 failed launches. Musk went into crisis mode. He invested what was left of his fortune and then some. He worked around the clock. Possibly as a result, his 8-year marriage to Justine Musk, the mother of his 5 sons, fell apart. But Musk leveraged his maniacal work ethic to stage a comeback. The next SpaceX launch was a success, and it went on to bigger and more significant launches. Tesla, thanks in part to an investment from Daimler, pulled through and had its IPO in 2010. So far, it has handily outperformed the market. Solar City, too, successfully went public in 2012. Even with a long track record of impossible successes, Musk has doubters. But he doesn't have much time for them. Critics rail that Musk has grown dependent on Uncle Sam's lark jets. Tesla benefits from green tax credits, and SpaceX inked a $1.6 billion contract with NASA. Former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin attacked Tesla as Obama subsidized in 2013. Musk scoffed in return via Twitter that he was deeply wounded. Detractors of the Model S, who said its battery doesn't last the full 265 miles advertised, gets even testier retorts. In 2013, he lashed out at the New York Times, also via Twitter, saying its story about the Model S underperforming on a road trip was inaccurate. He also lobbed a playful but unprintable insult, plus a lawsuit, later dismissed, at a British reviewer for making similar claims. So far, he's proving them wrong. Tesla has paid back some $450 million in government loans ahead of schedule and has announced its first quarter of profitability in May 2013, trouncing analyst estimates. At 42, Musk may be settling into his skin, or he may be headed towards a spectacular flameout. It's still impossible to say whether Tesla will usher in an era of clean-burning automobiles, if Solar City will make sustainable energy a reality, or if SpaceX will one day extend the survival of the human race by putting men on Mars. What is clear is that thinking big paid off for him. He's taking risks with his wealth, his personal life, and his reputation, and so far a great many of them have returned huge dividends, not just for him, but also for science and society. Will his ideas save the world? Maybe not, but the real risk might be not trying at all. So that's where I'm going to stop it on this one, guys. Feel free to leave your comments below. Yeah, I'm going to close it here, and we will see you the next time around. We'll talk soon, guys. Bye.